So welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Uh, my name is Evanique for those of you that don't know, and I will be moderating until Sharikot gets here. He had to work a little late tonight, so I will be moderating and he'll pop in and take over. So Gary, whenever you're ready, I just ask everybody to go on mute. That way, we don't have background sound. So whenever you're ready, Gary.
All right, I'm ready. So I'll go ahead and share screen. And is everybody able to see it just fine?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
Yes.
And so at this point, I was talking with Shrikant about just kind of like getting back to like following the Aquinas commentary and then just going through that. And then just kind of tracking with it and seeing what I can do with there. So we're back to like looking at the text. And if you've looked at the commentary at all, tonight is on John 15, 14 through 17. And these are the three themes that Aquinas talks about in his commentary. Friendship, choosing, Jesus saying, I'm going to choose you, saying that to the disciples. But Aquinas in his commentary goes into a thing on like predestination and, the foreknowledge of God from, past history. And then the idea of bearing fruit. I found this cute little cartoon and I just realized now that I don't have it attributed like properly to the artist. They do lots of science-based what is it? It's like XCD-TD. I can't even remember the acronym of the artist, but you can look it up. I used to think correlation implied causation. Then I took a statistics class. Now I don't. She's like, okay, sounds like the class helped. Well, maybe. And so if you're familiar with the fallacy of causation versus correlation, this is exactly what it's speaking to right here. What I can do, like coming from a perspective of, working on my thesis in the Gospel of John, and just being kind of like steeped with some of the academic side of Christian literature, is kind of go to the background, look at the background information that could hypothetically be there. And so that's kind of what I did with this passage too. What I find is in some of the literature, you'll have really people that are really staunchly religious and have really strong beliefs that they might have been raised with from a very early age. They want to believe that the religious beliefs are completely unique. And if you say, well, the Gospel of John is related to such and such in the culture or whatnot, they get really offended. If it's not completely unique, then I don't want to hear it. It couldn't possibly have anything to do with it. On the other hand, lots of times scholars will go the other route and try to interpret something exclusively in light of maybe some sort of historic event that's taking place or something in the culture. And so both of those are two extremes of the pendulum. And so without really laying out what it is or it isn't, what I can do is give some of that background, and we can kind of like make that assessment ourselves as the text, how unique is the text and how dependent is it on other literature? Is this making any sense right now?
Not really.
Not really? Okay. What questions do you have?
I am just sorry.
No, that's fine. So I'll continue on with the background literature, and we'll just go straight at it. And I'll probably be able to explain it a little better as we go.
No, Gary, I would like to know.
So what I'm getting at is well, actually, I'll explain it as we go. This will be kind of easy. It's probably better with an example. So, for instance, with friendship is one of the key elements that's going on in John chapter 15. Does anybody, actually, I'm going to stop share for a moment. Does anybody have the text, and is anybody able to read the verses for us?
Joe looks like he has it ready.
Yeah. All right, go for it.
You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. This I command you to love, so that you will love one another.
Awesome. So that's kind of, those are the three themes that we're working at. You can see that they're plotted out just right in order, starting off with friendship, moving on to the idea of Jesus choosing his disciples, choosing them to be his friends, and then going into this idea of bearing fruit. If anybody wants to, as I go, I'm going to start explaining what's happening. And if anybody wants to ask any questions as we go slide by slide, Evanique, are you able to monitor that? And then we can pause.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, they can type exclamation point in the chat, and I will let Gary know to address. So Gary, what I'll do is before you go to the next slide, I will tell you somebody raised their hand.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Yep.
Perfect. So we're going to start with like Aristotle. He spoke extensively about friendship. And so as we're reading this text, if we were to transport ourselves back into the mind of the first century audience as they're reading it, as soon as Jesus says, "You're my friends and you're no longer servants," immediately we might recall like the Stoics talk about friendship, Aristotle talks about friendship, and so we might have some preconceptions of what friendship really is. We probably have ideas in our head right now about friendship, in modern society, but Aristotle was the first person to really kind of like try to narrow it down and give a real definition for it and talk about it in kind of a robust detail. So I'm going to follow some of what he has to say. And we'll read this slide together. It says, "Friends hold a mirror up to each other. Through that mirror, they can see each other in ways that would not otherwise be accessible to them. And it is this mirroring that helps them improve themselves as persons." And so I really think this is a beautiful, beautiful statement about friendship. And the other reason why I put it up here is it reminded me of the foot washing scene that the farewell discourse begins with, because Jesus says to the people, "I've done this as an example to you that you should do as I have done." And so we have like this picture of the foot washing as a mirror, as an example of friendship. And we get to look at it and kind of reflect back on it. And so there might be a little bit of Aristotle involved in there. When Aristotle talks about friendship, he describes it along three forms. And he also groups them in like stages of life. He says that young kids look for what he calls pleasant friendship. This is the friendship of convenience. These are the people that you just happen to be hanging out with. You have a lot of similar interests. These are the people you go to the pub with, or that you go out rock climbing or whatever else it is. But these are just friendships that are just, we use the word hedonistic. They're based on pleasure and these shared interests, and your friendship is based on the fun. He says when you get to middle age, you're starting to think more about your career. You're trying to think of accomplishments. You want to further yourself and get yourself situated in life. And so older people, as they start to enter the professional sphere, they start looking for places where they can make connections, who they can rub elbows with. They look for other people of status. And so it's what he calls like a friendship of utility. Now I'm looking for friends that are useful to whatever needs I might have. It's not necessarily exploitive, but it's, definitely we're looking for people who can cooperate with us and kind of further our bigger agendas or our life goals. And then finally, Aristotle talks about what he calls perfect friendship. And this friendship is enjoyed for its own sake. And these are the people that we choose to be friends with because we admire their virtues. These are the good people that, maybe they have particular, just they're particularly honest, or they make us feel good to be around them. They might have traits that we aspire to have ourselves. We want to be more like them. They're not just good people, they're just admirable people. When I think of this, I think of when I was first in college, a friend of mine was speaking about a pastor of the church, and he just casually said, "Is like, oh, I love Pastor Tom. He's such good people." And at that moment, I thought to myself, is like, I want to be the kind of person that other people just casually, if I come up in conversation, they casually say, "Oh, Gary's a great guy," and it's just like, that's just part of the conversation that they think so kindly of him. That's the kind of friendship that Aristotle talks about. It's just like, it's such a virtue that you exemplify virtue so much that people just want to be around you and want to have you around them. Here's his exposition, a little bit more of what he has to say about it. Said it's natural that such friendships should be infrequent, for such men are rare. Further, such friendship requires time and familiarity, nor can they admit each other to friendship or be friends till each has been found lovable and been trusted by each. A wish for friendship may arise quickly, but friendship does not. And so I think it's kind of a beautiful thing is he makes that distinction that so commonly people say, like, got a lot of acquaintances, but not very many friends. And so he breaks down friendship and talks about what is a true friend. So when we get to Gospel of John, we have Jesus' Facebook friend request going on there. We look at the criteria for friendship, and it's something very different. So we might, evoke, as we read the text, we might be thinking of Aristotle, and we're challenged. This is the question of, like, is it the same or is it different? Is it correlation and causation, or is it something completely unique? And it's probably a little bit of both. Jesus' criteria for choosing, oh, I have a typo there, the disciples, it's not based on any of the criteria that Aristotle lists for the different kinds of friendship, of pleasure, utility, or virtue. It's completely unmerited. This is Jesus making the decision to choose them. But he does choose them for a purpose, and the disciples are chosen to bear fruit. And so it's this interesting thing in, like, virtue is present in what Jesus has to say. That's the idea of bearing fruit, is that they're gonna become virtuous through this friendship, but it's not necessarily the cause. It's not because they have virtue in themselves. It's not a merited thing, which is the way Aristotle describes friendship. And so that brings us to, like, something interesting, is the whole idea of friendship in our passage that we looked at is related to this idea of choice. And in our context of the whole Gospel of John, we have Jesus as a divine figure choosing these disciples, not because of anything special that they've done, but choosing for them to be his friends. And so it's really interesting and very, very precious thing that's going on. Which made me think, especially since Aquinas talks about it, what's the role of fate? Because that's, Aquinas goes into this discussion in the commentary about free will and predestination and what's going on. And he actually asks the question, is like, did Jesus choose the disciples because they're great people and they merited that choice? And Aquinas is saying, no, this is Jesus' own decision to choose them, not because of anything that they've done. Is there a question I need to go to?
Yes, Katie has one in the chat. She says, contrasting with how God chose prophets.
I'm actually going to slightly get into that. That's going to be like the next slide or the slide after that. Are we okay to wait for one slide before I get that?
Katie?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So it's what's interesting is in Greco-Roman society, you have the fates, and fate is inescapable. There's nothing you can really do about it. And it's significant when people talk about the fates in Greco-Roman culture and Greek mythology. They make a big point that even Zeus, who's the head of the pantheon, is not able to defy the fates. And there's one very rare circumstance that's usually given as the example. It's the story of Metis and Athena. And if you're familiar with the story at all, I'll recap it just a bit. Is Uranus is the sky, and is defeated and killed by Kronos, his son. Or not killed, just defeated by his son Kronos. Kronos goes on to father Zeus, and Zeus defeats Kronos in the war against the Titans and sets up the Olympians. Zeus's first wife is this goddess Metis, and she prophesies that just as Uranus was defeated by Kronos and Kronos was defeated by Zeus, Zeus will one day be defeated by his own son. And so Zeus is like, well, how do I stop this from happening? So he swallows Metis. And so she's still technically alive, sitting in his belly. And it's like, if she doesn't have a kid, if I don't have a son with Metis, then I can't have a kid that's going to defeat me. And so that was his intervention to try to prevent himself from having that prophecy, from being defeated by his own son. And so that's the rare exception. Mesopotamian concepts, they also had a very similar to Greco-Roman attitudes towards fate and destiny, that, you know, when something is fated, that's the way it is. There's nothing that you can really do to get away from it. But in Mesopotamia, fate is often decreed and can be chosen prior to action. And that might not make a whole lot of sense. But in the story of Marduk and Tiamat, Tiamat is the goddess of the sea. She represents chaos. This would be a wonderful story for the divine feminine to talk about, like, what's going on here. Marduk is the storm god. He's the equivalent, Babylonian equivalent of Zeus. And before he goes to battle against Tiamat, he asks that an offering is made and that the fates decree his victory. And so he goes into battle, presumably with fate already on his side. In the farewell discourse, Jesus makes two choices. First off, he's the firstborn. He's heir of all things. And that's what only begotten means. This idea of the only begotten means everything is his, and so he has the right of inheritance. But he makes the choice to be a servant, and so we're back to this analogy of the foot washing. Is that, again, it's kind of a special thing, is that you have God personified in human form. He has and can do anything he wants. He's the locus of all power, and he chooses to be a servant. He chooses to be a slave, and he chooses to clean the feet even of the person who's going to betray him. And so that's there as our example, and that's underneath this whole conversation. Is at the back of our mind is the idea of this foot washing God, as that's what's taking place. Everything is being spoken from the standpoint of somebody who's a servant. Jesus exercises a power reserved for the fates in Greco-Roman society by making this choice. And so he decrees the fate of the disciples beforehand by choosing them. And so again, there's this kind of interesting thing, is when we talk about the choice, the reader at the time might have this idea of like what's going on, and might think of this idea of fate and the future, especially in the context of the farewell discourse. And this is kind of my answer to you on the slides, Katie, is when we go from like Genesis all the way through, when God chooses the prophets, he interestingly chooses the underdog in almost every situation. All of these people, these are the examples I give, are all the younger brothers. We would think that it would be the older brother is esteemed in society. That's the one who's going to get all the inheritance. But the biblical authors like go out of their way to have this idea of, the younger person, the person that wouldn't normally, get any kind of rights of inheritance or anything. This is the person of priority in the text. And so that correlates really well, especially when you look at like what happens to the prophets. It never goes well for any of them. They always have a bad go of it. And so when we look at the text, the same thing is happening even in Jesus' own example. Is presumably he would be, having all these rights of inheritance, but instead he's down there washing people's feet. And so it's kind of it's just, that's the way choice kind of works out. And that brings us to the conclusion of it, is what they were chosen for. They're chosen to produce fruit. And the theme of choice and blessing is united with the earliest narratives. And so this idea all the way back to Genesis 12, this is what, Jewish people would point to as like the birth of the nation of Israel. In the earliest narrative, God chooses Abraham and says, out of you, I'm going to make a great nation. And the purpose of making him into a nation isn't just that he's going to be great and he's going to be wonderful, but the second half of this quote here is, I'll bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you, and all the peoples on the earth will be blessed because of you. So this idea of being chosen in order to bear fruit is kind of this idea from the very beginning of say God's plan. It's the goal. Like, I think the whole gospel story is kind of captured from the very beginning here, is that the idea of what God is doing is striving to bring blessing for everybody. And we're back to this idea of the underdog. Who does God choose and why? Again, back to our, the Torah. This is the book of the law. I have a little map of Mesopotamia here. Israel is right here in this little sliver. And you have, up in the bottom right-hand corner, if you look really closely, you can see Jerusalem. And that's it. There's not much else that's building on it. Egypt is down to the south. Babylon is into the north and also to the east there. If we were to go up north even more, the Hittite Empire is up in that direction. And Israel is just kind of sitting at this crossroads, this trading route. Is anybody who wants to go anywhere just kind of pass through Israel. And it's like, I've read one historian said they were unfortunately located there. But in the idea from the perspective of the Middle East, or from the Jewish people in their own scriptures, it's not an unfortunate thing. It's like they're intentionally at the crossroads of the world. They're like the belly button of the universe in a way, so that they could have that exposure, that anybody that comes through there would be able to receive the blessing of God just casually through passing through, because they're on their way on a trade route or whatever else it is. They're at the center of it all. Oops. And so that's kind of the conclusion, is just those three themes that are from Aquinas, is that this idea of chosen to be friends. And like Israel, it's not based on merit. And so that's kind of for me, that's the thing that distinguishes friendship in the Gospel of John in this passage from, say, Aristotelian friendship. We're being chosen, but not because of anything we have. And as a result of that chosen, we become something greater. Also chosen to yield fruit, and that's where that being greater is. Similar to the whole notion of friendship being a mirror, is that we're chosen to be a blessing through service. And so there's Jesus modeling that attitude of service. We see it and we get to become that. And if you have a little bit of familiarity with, say, the Gospels, and actually, most of the New Testament, the theme appears quite frequently, is this idea of the last will be first and the first will be last. Is this idea of this upending social hierarchies, this upending and challenging the status quo, is from the very beginning of it's just from the very beginning in Genesis all the way through. We see it in the Gospels, is this idea of the underdog being chosen to be a blessing towards everybody else. You know, it's never the person that we would think that has the privilege or the status or the honor or the strength that's going to go ahead and be in charge. It's always the underdog. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Gary. Again, great presentation, a lot of thought-provoking things. So now we are going to go to if anybody has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. And while people are lining up, Gary, I have a question.
Sure, go for it.
Why do you think that God always chose the underdog? Or the younger brother or the least?
I'm not going to pretend to have a really clear answer for that. But like, you know, it's one of those things that it kind of confronts the scholar when you look at the text. It's just like, oh, it certainly challenges, like that's the standard hierarchy. If you're looking at like you mentioned, yeah, David and Goliath is a good example. And that was the image I have there, was David fighting Goliath. You know, especially the divine feminine, the big question is like, what's going on here? You know, the goddess was so prominent all throughout these cultures, and at some point it's not. You know, why did this take place? And so there's a kind of this, maybe this dialogue with what's going on there in the biblical text through its conscious subterfuge of the status quo. And so throughout the text, that's kind of an idea, is we're constantly being challenged to question whatever the status quo is in our societies. And I think at least from the perspective of the biblical authors, that's the intention of this, is to constantly challenge, like nobody has it right. You know, we need to have some humility in it. And so the stories always talk about the underdog, you know, coming up out of the dregs and then being a revolution to society. So I kind of like that. But yeah, that's the best answer I can come up with.
Thank you, Gary. That was a really good answer. Up next, we have Joe, followed by Penny. And if anybody else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
Yeah, I just have a couple, brief comments maybe to get us started, and we'll maybe like to hear, Gary's feedback on that. I think that the idea of friendship is really obviously very important in this particular instance. And I think if you look at across all philosophers in the past, they all mention one of the things that they all keep coming back to is this idea of mutual respect. That there is a mutual respect for one another in any kind of true friendship. And so what are you respecting then is the next question, right? And what Christ is asking us in this particular instance is he's asking us to respect his teachings and his life. And if you even look at it from past philosophers, they look at the idea of mutual respect. Again, if you think about what is it that you're respecting about a friend per se, it's their personal character, it's their character and their integrity, so that you have a mutual goal. And this idea, this mutual goal is virtue, right? And that's what Christ is saying, essentially, in a way. It's the same thing. It's a form of virtue. So this is the friendship that is actually being fortified by this form of mutual respect. It's also, there's the other thing I think of friendship. I think it's really worth mentioning, and this is what Christ is actually is demanding in a way is trust. And this element of trust is, well, the saying, trust in me, follow my example, and you will be happy. Well, and you'll you'll be happy and eternally. So I think that's true of every form of friendship prior to Christ as well. So there's these common themes that we're starting to see, and I think that there's also this element of even community that's created amongst the apostles that's really important to note, because friendships, yes, that they're tight bonds that where everybody's pursuing kind of the same ideas, and so that it's true that it's afforded to everyone with Christ. It's not necessarily merit based, but there is still I would even say a requirement of some, in order to be a friend of Christ, to follow a certain set of rules, or even examples of Christ, in order to, to be a true friend of Christ. So maybe I would just like to get maybe those comments, and then we can come back to some other ideas that because friendship's a very, very deep topic, and I've kind of only glanced over the top part, the high level stuff. But this idea of mutual respect, trust, and community, they even mention, even the Catholic Church will say today, community of saints. So it's this idea that, and even in the Aquinas commentary, where he says they go from strength to strength, the God of gods will be seen in Zion. So I would just like to see or just hear some basic comments on that. I'm a little all over the place with those three main points.
Gary, did you want? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wasn't certain if you were going to go through the list or if you wanted. Yeah, I actually agree with you, Joe, on all of it. I think if the only thing that I was really kind of emphasizing is that the friendship is initiated by Jesus, and that initiation isn't a product of merit, but maintaining a friendship with anybody, like the closeness of that bond is going to be reliant on those elements that you just talked about, like trust. That's huge. Some of you might have heard of Brene Brown. She did a short video. It's like 20-30 minutes or something like that on Oprah, called The Anatomy of Trust, and kind of breaks down what it means, trust. And you hit a lot of those points when you were talking about trust. Is, you have to be reliable. You have to, it's to trust somebody means to know that they're going to do what they said that they're going to do. And so, to have friendship with Jesus means relying on those kinds of things. So yeah, mutual respect, trust, and the whole notion of community. I think you kind of nailed it. That's literally what's taking place in the whole farewell discourse, is that Jesus, the whole idea of calling them friends, it's not servants, it's a different thing. It becomes a community of people right there. And this whole final discourse is about establishing, maybe in some sense, the community rule. What does it mean for us to live in community? There's the example of the foot washing. Just as I washed your feet, you're going to wash one another's feet. And so it's a real beautiful thing. And I just like, all your points are really well taken, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Up next, I have Penny, followed by Katie. If anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Penny.
Okay, well, when I put my asterisk, I was going to talk about the underdog thing too. So, and there's been some comments in the chat, but I was going to say, I was taught, I think when I grew up in the Christian church, that, God didn't necessarily, he chose somebody that society might view as an underdog, but God knew the qualities, the, the inherent strengths, the things that people weren't looking at because they were just looking at wealth and, birth order and things like that. So he was really had the ability to look at the true person. And, so those are the ones he chose. And the same way, I think then, as a member of the Christian community, that God knew your strengths and that everybody had strengths that would be useful. But I don't know if that's kind of it's similar to what you said, I think.
It's funny because it seems like a surreptitious way of asserting the meritocracy, right? We're going to say that it's still merit-based, but, God knows the merits and they're not the same merits that we have. And so there's kind of like, that's why I have that quote from Deuteronomy, because he flat out says it's not because of anything that you did or because you were great. In fact, he reminds them of this throughout. Israel, you guys are going to run away. He doesn't really have a whole lot of things to say about them for their merits. What he does say, but I love you. I'm loving you. I'm making a choice to love you. And that's setting the standard in the Torah all throughout that. The foundational 5 books of Moses are about God saying, I'm choosing you because I love you. And I might have brought this up, the whole deliverance out of Egypt and the plagues and everything. The Israelites there, they don't do anything but grumble and complain the whole time while they're being delivered. And even after they're delivered, they're like, you just brought us out in the desert to die. If we go back to Egypt, at least we'll have leeks. And I'm like, really? And so this statement about Deuteronomy is made after all of that grumbling. And he's like, I didn't choose you because you were great. I just loved you. And I think that's what Jesus is kind of referring back to, is like, you didn't choose me. I chose you. And I chose you to bear fruit. And so that's my take on it, is I think that we like to do that. We like to, feel good about our merits or think that, I have something special. I think that we do have special things that maybe God grooms us through love. Like when you're loved by somebody, maybe your best qualities come out as a result of that love. That love has this way of teasing things out of us that we didn't even know about ourselves. And I think that's more of what's going on with this friendship discourse and that story of God choosing the underdog. It kind of like grows things that maybe we would have never known or seen in ourselves or others.
But
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Penny.
I just want to raise one point, because it seems from what I knew, Jesus was not like a member of the ruling class or something. So if he wouldn't try to choose like, a Roman ruler or, a high Jewish official and say, hey, come on and follow me, they would have said like, no way. Not that he still chose, obviously, but he chose from those who were receptive. I don't know. Maybe I got it wrong, but.
Well, that's another way to look at it, is like when we break it down, and because we know a little bit about the different disciples because we get a list of it, and we also know some of their career paths. And so at least one of them was a revolutionary that was trying to overthrow the government. He was a zealot. And so he's part of, like, if you've ever seen Monty Python's Life of Brian, he had the Judean Liberation Front and the Liberation Front of Judea that both hate each other. Yeah. So you had one of those guys there. You had Matthew, who was a tax collector, and so he might have been well-to-do. And his affinities are with the Roman government. Like, he's well-to-do because Rome is paying him. So we have this tax collector as being paid by Rome, and the zealot that wants to overthrow the government. And that's just 2 of them. Then we got a couple of fishermen. In the list, there's this interest. It's a motley crew. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that.
Right.
Just what's really going on with there. And then, if we were to get a little bit deeper into the history, we had all kinds of claims of messiahship before and after Jesus. And there was a huge Jewish revolt in like 130s, Simon Bar Kokhba, where Rome came in and genocided the Jewish people all throughout there, and lost like 1 to 2 legions of troops in the process. It was a bloodbath. It was huge. So yeah, that's the political, that's the social political environment that's going on. I hope that like sheds some light, and that's
Yeah,
really what I'm trying to. I'm sorry, is to just go and like give what's some of the background that might help us to understand what's taking place here a little bit more.
no, thank you.
Thank you, Penny and Gary. Up next, I have Katie, followed by Joe.
That was going to be my point, was exactly that the disciples were fishermen to become fishers of men. And then Jesus, the historical Jesus, was a carpenter in the Bible. So maybe I'm not sure whether, but I've only read commentary in books about Jesus being a carpenter. I have never read the Bible's references to it.
And just as a little aside on that, in school they brought up that we always say carpenter, but he might have actually been more of a craftsman, like a cabinet maker, that kind of a thing, like somebody that's designing fine furniture. But that's just a little nuance. There's little things when you look at the text that like shed maybe give you a little bit more detail on it. But yeah, it's like this, he was not rich. We actually know that he comes from a poor family because of the offering. You're supposed to bring an offering to the temple at the birth of a child, and the offering that his family brings, it's based on economic status. Like you give what you can, and the offering that they bring is the bottom of it. It's like 2 turtle doves. It's like pennies. Like that's all they had was pennies to be able to afford an offering.
Thank you, Gary. Just one note, Katie, I have to say I agree with you. I know the commentary says he was a carpenter or something like that, but I'm trying to remember if it says it in the Canonical Bible. I don't know. But that was a very good question because it just made me think like, yeah, I don't remember seeing it. So anyway, just a little aside. So up next, I have Joe. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just do a little bit of a second round of the idea on friendship, I guess. It's this, because I mean, this is what what are I think it's important to kind of try and tease out the traits of friendship in the sense that how Christ actually functioned, so and his relationships with the apostles. Specifically, one of the things that I think that is the mark of a true friend is somebody that's continually challenging your beliefs. And I think Christ continuously does that, obviously. He's constantly challenging the disciples and their beliefs, what they believe to be good. And that's it's very similar to the idea of, you go back to Socrates or any other, is that the pursuit of wisdom, right? You're pursuing truth in that sense. So Christ is acting as a friend in that fashion. The other thing is that what Christ is doing, I think that is a mark of a true friend, is that he's holding the apostles accountable and for their actions. And so by doing that, that's, if you think about it in true friendship terms, that's exactly what friends do. They hold each other accountable for their actions. So and this is coming back to the importance of a shared value. And I think in some ways, it's actually it's really interesting that we're talking about this idea of the underdog being, always, we're focusing on the underdog, the idea of, and the reason why is because I think that's interesting is because the tools, if you will, that Christ gives us um, are accessible to everyone. And I think that that's the apostles, that they're fishermen, that they're essentially that, they are, that you don't need to be a king or a person of great influence in order to access what Christ has provided us with. And I think that there's it's significant in the sense that the Christ came down as the least among us, and what he pursued was, of the high, what he pursued was what many philosophers obviously consider to be the highest pursuit, which is virtue and kindness and love, and for their fellow fellow human beings. So I think that when we're talking about some of these common traits that Christ has just, demonstrated throughout the Gospel of John, or throughout the Gospels in general, we can actually look at this from even how traditional philosophers have actually looked at friendship as well. And that's why I really appreciated how you brought in Aristotle. And there are even somebody who I think has a lot of very good things to say on friendship is Epicurus. And one of the things is actually, that he mentions, Epicurus talks about, is the idea of being there when it's not convenient. And I thought about immediately Peter. And I thought, wow, in a sense that, talk about not being there when it was when it wasn't convenient. Now it's just interesting to think of that from that perspective when you think of friendship. I'll leave my comments there for now, but we can even come back to how the role of admiration actually plays in this process as well. Like there's, a certain amount of admiration, and I maybe mentioned that with respect, but I even go so far as to say admiration is an important part of friendship. And again, you're admiring the qualities of the individual, the character of the individual, which is something that is a true friend, because that's something that is sustainable. If you're admiring, say, their accomplishments, those will fade. And that type of friendship isn't enduring. So the prescription that Christ is giving us is actually, these are enduring principles as well. Does anybody else have a comment? Or I'll stop talking.
Oh, Gary, you want to go, or?
I was just going to say thank you. I'm most familiar with Aristotle, which is why I referred to him, but I'm fully aware that like friendship was a big discussion. And I was going to just say thank you for bringing in Epicurus. That's awesome. Yeah, I just didn't have time to go looking into everybody, but yeah, Aristotle's one that I'm really.
Oh no, yeah, I didn't mean that, but I think Aristotle. Yeah, I mean Aristotle's the framework for friendship is is the most well known. But it's interesting. I think if we look at again the whole history and philosophy of friendship, we see that Christ embodies those things and more, and in a sense that it's a higher level. It's a deeper relationship because it's a relationship with God. Anyway, so it's deeper than mutual respect. It's based on love, and I think that this is where we could even talk about the idea of the cardinal virtues and the theological virtues and how they play into this as well.
It also, for me, it resonates really well. It's actually in 1 John, and there's so many similarities between the epistles of John and the Gospel of John, is that we love him because he first loved us. And that's the emphasis in the passage that we read is you didn't choose me, I chose you. And so the love that we have for God is just like a natural response to being loved by him. And we're talking about a real love, not some sort of a manipulative thing. And that's really kind of, for me, that's what's really kind of the whole heart of the matter is I'm choosing you as friends. I'm loving you, and it's just like, now we're responding to that. But I saw that Connie raised her hand. Did I see that correctly?
Yeah, you did. Connie, did you have?
Yeah, what I was going to say quickly is I saw a very good documentary that talked about, because I always heard that Jesus was a carpenter, but it showed, it was a true documentary, and it showed that the houses were built of stone or cement. So it said by this theologian or whoever was doing this documentary that it's more likely he would have been more of a stone craftsman working with stone and building, but with stone versus building with wood. So that when we were talking about that, but since I'm here, I understand what Christ sees as friendship and love and forgiveness, and certainly we want to be more like him. That's what he wants us to be. But Joe, particularly in what you were saying, is what brought this up, is our responsibility back is to a friend that we have we'd have to have a lot of forgiveness because we're looking for virtue and all these qualities in friends. But on the other hand, there has to be a lot of forgiveness because he was betrayed and he forgave, right? So this friendship thing, I wish we could develop that more on the give and take of it, or if that makes sense. If not, that's okay.
I don't know. I was wondering if Joe had something to say on that.
No, I mean, I think that that's a fantastic point. I think that the idea that a friend, in a sense, can know your shortcomings and accept you for who you are in spite of those things. And I think that's where the element of it's not, in Christ's terms, it would be forgiveness, but in normal relationships, I think it's just an element of acceptance. So, since it's God, it's forgiveness. That's my thought on that particular comment. But yes, I think that's a very important part of what you brought up, Connie, is this element of, again, understanding somebody and knowing who they are. And if you think about it, even in terms of some of the best relationships that I know, they accept each other for who they are, in spite of all their shortcomings. And I'm thinking of specific couples that I know. Anyway, in general, that's my comment, but I do have another comment.
Yeah, go for it, Ebony.
Yeah, I think to Connie's point is that you got to look at the point of where Jesus says, if you are my friends, you will abide in me. I don't like some translations that say, do as I say. But I like the ones that said abide in me. And we talked about it in other meetups, and it's like in joining with someone. But, for people, I think it gives us, in a sense, it gives us a guidepost, right? Of how to look at friendship and how to look at friends. In that it provides us with, a person that abides with you wants the best for you, right? a person that abides in you loves you in a friendship type of way. They want to see you do good, and you want to see them do good. And I think when you were talking about the perfect friendship of Aristotle, that's what it brings up for me. It's not like a perfect person, because there's no such thing, but it's a person that will call you out when needed, but they will call you out in terms of love, never to hurt you, but always to want to see you be the best you are. And when they see that you're not being your best, they will let you know. And that's the true friendship, because they're willing to risk the friendship itself in order to help you out, to help you become the person that they see you to be. They see your greatness, and they want you to achieve it, and they will risk the friendship in order to tell you what they think. Hi, Shrikant.
Hi, Evanique. All right, so let's see where are we? So I'm so sorry for being late, but where are we in the meetup? Please let me know.
Sure. Go ahead, Gary.
I was gonna say we're hung up on friendship.
Have you finished your presentation?
I did finish the presentation.
Okay. Let's see. Can I give you my comments on the presentation, or do you want to go to the verses? I would like to tell you about my thoughts on the presentation, so we can just run through it very quickly. While I will talk, I will pretend that it's my presentation, and I will talk. I'll give you my comments. I'm assuming.
Do you want me to share the screen and show the presentation, and then you comment as we go?
Yeah, as we go by slide, because I have gone through it. So
Yes.
I will go ahead and make comments, and would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, I have to put it up for a vote to the group.
What do you want to
Yes,
vote?
we could do this. Yes, we can.
All right, so that was quick. All right.
Let's see.
Oh, you know what, Gary? Just one thing. I meant to ask Nalini. Did she get her question answered? Nalini, was your question answered from the presentation?
Okay,
I
well,
guess.
okay. Let's
Yeah.
all right. Yes, Evanique?
I didn't hear back.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
go ahead.
Shall we continue?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Gary, go ahead. Okay, so this is Gary's presentation on friendship, fate, and fruit. 3 Fs. Please go on. Next one. Okay.
This slide, maybe you could explain it a little bit better. That this was Nalini's question, and it's a new slide. You didn't see it.
No, that's fine. Let's skip that.
We could skip it. Okay, that's fine.
I'll just make a few comments because I don't want to belabor it too much. So I think this is a huge thing about being mirrored. I don't have any comments. I love this quote. Don't have any comments. Let's continue. Okay, I think this is really, and all my thinking about friendship has been based on this. Before I have encountered other things, I think this is a fantastic start. That's what Aristotle does. He takes kind of all the previous views of everybody and puts it together in this amazing way. So he's like he's this encyclopedia of everything at that. But if you look at it, the first 2 ones, one based on pleasure, which is emotional based, and second, which is based on physical goods, really physical goods and services. Those are all about very much this worldly. So the aspect of friendship that this is talking about, which relates to the kind of friendship that Jesus is talking about, is all about the third one. It's about the virtue. And it's very interesting to see the difference in the conception of virtue between Aristotle and Jesus. Because the virtue as described in Aristotle, if you go to the next slide. So when he describes about this, see what he's saying here is that virtue, you arrive at your conclusion of virtue after seeing the record of people, of saying, okay, this person has done good actions over such a long time. He also has the concept of habit of virtue, that they are used to doing this. And that's why. So it is all about looking at the past record and saying, that's why this person is virtuous, because so it's very much connected with habits and past records, this conception of virtue. Now, this is going to be very different when we come to Jesus. Next slide. Okay. So it is, I mean, the way in which I would put this is that, this is very, very fundamental. There are so many deep things here. One part of it is that the view of volition that underlies New Testament is dramatically different than that of Aristotle. Aristotle will say, this person has no record of doing good things. It's very unlikely that he can do any virtuous things in the future. That's the approach. It's kind of habit-based virtue. Whereas what the New Testament holds is that if you say yes to God, no matter what you've done in the past, you can flip. Okay, that's a huge difference between the two virtues. So I'm not commenting on everything. I'm just going to go if Gary, you want to comment on anything I'm saying, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you. No, I think you're doing great, and you can go slower. I know that you're trying to rush through it because we went through them. I'm sad that you weren't here, because I love it when you're here and we go slide by slide and we have like a little bit more discussion as we go.
So I'm trying to simulate that. Okay, I will do that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to skip. The other thing is about purpose here, which we will come to later on. It's a very deep issue, that of purpose. Let's go to the next one, because what I'm going to do is that, Gary, don't worry, because what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through this, and then when we look at the text itself, I will bring up the same themes in the text. I have not told you this, but I actually have a presentation on the 4 verses that we are going to study. And I've done something interesting that I think you maybe at least be intrigued by. I don't know whether you like it or not, but you're going to be intrigued by it for sure.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So now you see this concept of fate. Okay. This is very, very big. Okay. Also, there are lots of social concepts here. Aristotle and the Greek virtue is possible to only certain people. You know, people who don't speak like Greeks were called, they speak like bar, so they're barbarians. So there is this notion of barbarians versus Greeks. There is this notion of free men versus slaves. There is the notion of men versus women. There's all kinds of notion. So there are only certain people who have had certain kind of social upbringing, etc., or in a certain group. You're talking about the virtue and a way of operating, and the virtue, that idea is actually borrowed from the way in which things are done in that particular society. And the fate versus choice is something that we are going to keep coming up with again and again. Let's go to the next one. Okay, which chooses the servant, and he chooses the servant. Okay, so this point about choice is something that we will come to. There is the use of the word choose in the verses that we are studying, and we will look at that. You know, the difference between Aristotle and Jesus, and actually not just Aristotle and Jesus, but a lot of traditions that go before Jesus, and a lot of traditions after after that point actually are based on fate, are actually based on not choice. So choice is really the heart of the concept that Jesus is putting forth here. Please go on. Okay. Again, you have to look at the Old Testament. Again, I want to make this point that in the Old Testament, only certain people are chosen people, and rest are not. That is very relevant. And with Jesus, it expands further. So even that concept moves forward and expands in a dramatic way. It is about the underdog approach is very relevant here. Part of it is that it really doesn't matter whether you're underdog. It could be Solomon, who has a lot of wealth, or it could be David, who when starting out has nothing. It doesn't really matter. It is really about the choice that the person is making, regardless of their station. It is not to do with station. Whereas, Aristotle would say that, this virtue will lead to all goods at every level. So you can tell by the goods the person has, physical, social, emotional, conceptual, how much virtue. It's like it's the concomitant part. I mean, there is a very deep point, which is true there, that the virtue actually builds everything, but it is seen as being, how to put it, the active element, the active present element of choice in us, that spark that we are capable of doing in the present. That is what much of the Jesus's teaching is about. The value of that, regardless of where you are in the social hierarchy. I love the graphic there of David versus Goliath. Next up, let's go to the next one. Okay. So I'm great. Blessing those. Yes. So this idea of blessing, again, that is again a very, very deep idea of grace and acceptance of grace. So we'll come to that. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Very good. Let's go to the next one. I'm unfortunately, Gary, my understanding of the Old Testament is very, very superficial, so I cannot see all themes into it. So I'm going to stick to Gospel of John, what little I know.
And this is the last slide here.
Okay.
And I chose it because that's Aquinas' own words. The choice and appointed are the words he uses in this commentary.
Wonderful. Chosen to be friends, chosen to yield fruits, and chosen blessing through the service. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's dive deep into the text itself. Is that okay? Does that make sense? We have not started looking at the text yet, right? Evanique, no? Okay, so sorry, no problem. So can somebody read? I want at least 3 readings, and then I have some slides with my own readings. I'm just going to focus on just the verses now, 14 through 17. So who would like to read it? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Okay. Okay, we'll start with Evanique. Penny, would you read? Okay, so we'll do
Yes,
Evanique.
I could.
Evanique. So we'll do Evanique, Joe, and Penny. Evanique, 14 through 17.
Sure. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love each other.
Thank you. Joe.
I only have the Aquinas version.
Oh,
Is that okay?
sure, that's fine. That's fine.
All right. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. This I command you, to love one another.
Thank you. Next up is Penny.
Okay, this is the New Revised Standard Version. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So I'm now going to go through these four verses. Again, I have really good friends. So I was asking one of my friends, he said, you really need to know the words. And that made sense to me. So I said, okay, so let me try to look at each of the words. And there is something called the Interlinear Bible, which allows you to jump and look at each of the words. So I just looked at these four verses and looked at what I thought were the most relevant words, just like, few words. I think I do total of less than 10 words. Now, of course, I'm not a Greek scholar. So whatever I've done is just like 1 or 2 hours of work of trying to figure out what the original word meant. Okay. The thing is, each of these mentalities is very different. And just like in the Tao, we've seen when you actually try to commune with the original words, you get something very, very deep, because many times translations add their own layers of meaning, own layers of connotations, denotations. Some of the connections are lost. Language has its own nature. And of course, my understanding of Greek is very, very, very poor. So I'm going to try. Okay. And let's see what you think. Of course, Gary, you know a little bit better than me, so excuse all my errors and stuff like that. So, but let me try. Okay. So this is going to be, I'm going to share this. Okay. Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 14 through 17. So let's go verse by verse. The first one, let's go back here. Says, I'm using the ESV translation, and then I'm focusing on some words within it. You are my friends if you do what I command you. Okay. Now, I have never really liked the word command, because see, what I'm doing is that I'm trying to do almost an aesthetic summary. I'm trying to look at everything I know about Gospel of John and trying to see what word, I'm looking at the word itself, looking at the various meanings, various translations of it, various roots of it, and then trying to see what meaning actually fits best given the entire context of Gospel of John. Okay. So the word here is entelomai. Okay. So you're my friends if you do what I entelomai you. What does entelomai mean? Okay. Command is one translation. Another translation, another word is enjoin. So if I enjoin, what I enjoin you, or what I charge you, what responsibility I give you. Let's go further. Let's look at entelomai as a word. This friend of mine who knows Greek a little better than I do was telling me that this entelo is actually Aristotle's word. Aristotle was the first one started to use this. So this en is in, telos, purpose. So if you are in purpose, same purpose as me. So you're my friend if you are in the same purpose as me, if you're going in the same direction. Okay. Now that is a very different connotation. It's saying that each person has a purpose within them. And if the purpose that I have in me is the purpose that you have in you, then you're doing what I am doing, what my purpose is. You are in the same purpose as me. It's a very different connotation. Command, the connotations in English bring this one person ordering another person. Whereas when you look at the entelomai this way, it is about the relationship between the purposing of each other. Go ahead, Gary. Gary, feel free to comment on anything that you want.
I like what you're saying, and you probably already ran across it, but when he says, a new command I give you, that you love one another, where it's the same Greek word, that's the entelo. And so we could even specify as like, what is this purposing? It's referring back to the love command. If you might have already been heading into that, but that's the link that's being made in the text.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Gary. Now let's go to the second one. Okay, no longer. I'm going to move this. Give me a second here. All right, let's see, how do I move this? Okay, no longer do I call you servants, for servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. Okay. So let's look at these words. Doulos, servant. Okay. The best, again, I look at multiple meanings that are there in the dictionary, and the word is really slave. Okay. So no longer call you slaves. Now, remember, what is a slave? Slave, like when you dig down into it, it's like person who does not own himself. Okay. Again, when you think of master and slave, you always think of relationship between people. Okay. But look at the concept of own, because when you look at the word kurios, it means owner. Okay, so the concept here is own. So he's saying, no longer do I call you persons who do not own themselves. Now, go back to the chapter on the blind man. At the end of it, Jesus is saying, truth will set you free. And these Pharisees are asking, what are you talking about? We are not slaves. And what does Jesus say? He says, you're slave to sin. See, if you own yourself, you do not own yourself if you're attached to your material things, if you are attached to sins, if you're attached not to the core of you, but to what is on the periphery, you do not own yourself. Now, so look at the idea of own that is going through here. What he's saying, if you look at the concept of own here, so just be on the lookout for that concept, okay? Now, look at what he's saying. He's saying for a doulos does not know. Now, know actually comes from perceive, does not see, okay? So you're a slave if you're blind. And what are you blind to here? You're saying you're blind to God. Okay, so again, this is the same theme as the blindness, sight, ownership, and lack of ownership. Okay, look at these connections here. So a slave does not see, does not know what his master is doing. So you don't know what God is doing because you do not know God. But what he's saying is that I have called you friends because whatever I've heard from my Father, I have made known to you. So if you know the Father, okay, if you know the Father, then you own yourself because you are a child of God. See, to own oneself is to own one's own nature, to say yes to your own nature. And that is a divine nature, that's the divine spark in you. If you do not see that, you do not see the master, and you do not know what the master is doing or what you are doing actually, and then you're slave to everything. So friends, so he's saying, I have called you friends. Now, he's not talking about relationships between him and other people like master and slave. He's talking about your state, their state. Because they now know God. They know themselves. They know others. They know him. They have the same purpose. They are in the same purpose. They're entello. They are following the love command. So they are at once. They own themselves. So there is a concept of ownership. They are free. By the way, the word freedom and friend have the same root. And they can see or they can know. So you can see that this entire complex of words is pointing to something far deeper. It is doing the same thing of, at the spiritual level, what you can see at the physical level. So he's describing master and servant and friendship, and then he's transferring that to that. Go ahead, Gary.
I don't want to steal your thunder, but are you going to talk about how the word know changes?
I'm going to look. My knowledge is very limited. I'm going to do what I can, and then I'm going to throw it to you to add anything that you want to add.
Then I'll only say one thing, which is the word oida, like you're talking about right there. It's about seeing and perceiving, and I love how you're bringing in that the slave doesn't even see.
Mhm.
Like, it's a different kind of knowledge. But when he gets here to the bottom where he says, all that I've heard from my Father I've made known to you, he shifts to a different form of the word knowledge. And that's where we get our word knowledge, is gnosko, the gnosis kind of thing. And that's an experiential knowledge. And it's like, I have not just known, made it, to tell you or to reveal it to you, but I've given you the experience of what I have heard from my Father. You have experienced that.
Beautifully put. No, absolutely. I looked at the word, I spent some time, and I was trying to say, okay, what can I do where, it's like there is just so much going on here in this verse 15. Like, for example, another thing that is going on is that actually only he sees the Father. And he's the Word, and he has heard this. So that's the akuo, right? He has heard it, and he is making it known through the Word what he has seen. And that's how they know. So there is this transfer from sight to the Word, to the sight, to the experience. So there is that the Word is the intermediary. He's the Word was the intermediary between the I do and the have made known. So it's just so rich, so rich. Thank you, Gary. Next, let's go to this one. Okay. Now, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give to you. Okay. Now the word choose, okay, is a very deep word here. See, we are used to word, saying, do I want vanilla or chocolate? That as choose, okay? This choose, eklegomai. It's a different eklegomai. It's a, I eklegomai you. That choice is saying it is a very deliberate choice of saying yes to something with the fullest understanding of that. So it's a very, very deep, a lot is going on. So in some ways, many of these words, like friend, choose, love, the way we look at these words is actually a very superficial, materialistic, temporary kind of a thing. Whereas each of these words have a depth, which is incredible. I love the word Pharaoh, bear fruit. Okay. The best meaning of that I got was bring forth. Okay, Pharaoh means to bring forth. So what it is doing, and see the poetry of it and how it connects to the whole thing. This is the vine. This is the true vine. You are the branches. Okay, he's saying you are the branch. Let that sap flow through you. Bring forth the fruit by letting the sap flow through you. You will bear fruit, which is the result. But you're doing that by letting the sap flow through you. Let the Tao flow through you. So it's a beautiful, beautiful word, and it connects with this entire theme of I am the true vine. Last word I want to look at here is onoma. So that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give to you. Okay, again, we have a tendency of looking at it saying, oh, I will just ask Jesus whatever I want in his name and I will get it. okay, you have to understand the word onoma, okay? In your name, so the phrase is in your name. It's not a noun. Okay, in your name means in your character, in the same cause as you. So if you're asking something in the same cause, in the same character, so if you are in the character of Jesus, if you are letting that sap flow through you, then whatever you ask, because you will ask in that character, it's not you will get anything, but you will get things if you ask in line with what Jesus is, his true nature. If you ask in that name, then you will get. This is the same idea as eternal life. It will flow. Basically, you are acting in accordance with the Tao. You're asking that. Finally, I'm going to go through number 17. These things I entolomai you, so that you will love one another. Okay, I'm going to start with the last word, one another. This is actually a reciprocal pronoun. Okay, we don't have reciprocal pronouns in English. We use two words, one another. So you have to think of one and another, and then it's kind of together. But the reciprocal pronoun means you're thinking of the reciprocity as the unit, as a basic unit. Now that's a very profound way of thinking. Okay, this language has it. Alelon, right? It's one another. It's basically these together in a interacting way, regarded as a unit. Okay, so I love that. And then of course the other word is agape or agapo. I mean, that love is again one of the deepest ideas here. It is the love of God. It is love of virtue, love of truth, love. I mean, it is the highest kind of love. And if you look at this love and the philos that we're talking about, it's the parallelism. This agape is the love between the Son and the Father. Okay, and there is this love between human beings, and there is this kind of equivalent in going, if you have that, then what you have is friendship. If it's friendship is based on that, it is a standard which, now let me contrast this to Aristotle. In Aristotle, firstly, it is not universal. Here it is universal. Here the grace is raining down on you, and you can simply choose that, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done in the past, you can do that. Okay, the concept here is deeply metaphysical. It's not a social concept. It is a metaphysical concept. It is a universal concept. And it is accessible to each of us all the time. And the price of it is simply to act in the name, or to act in the same purpose. So that's what, just looking at these words, I'm able to see. Would love to hear any comments. go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to comment. We'll start with Joe.
The one that really struck me was the first slide with the idea of purpose, because that is so critical to what we're talking about in general. Because even when I'm thinking back to even what Gary's presentation and linking it back to that, the idea of fate also comes into play. And so there's a divine reason for everything when you start to say that there's purpose. So that it's a very deep idea that everything happens for a reason. It's no longer, you know, that this is why, you know, why things are happening. There's also, I really very much appreciated the idea of when you were talking about owning themselves and what that really means, and not necessarily kind of deviating towards material things. I think that that's really critical importance. And actually, I think there is a direct relationship there with the Gita when you're talking about going towards the center. And
Absolutely. Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
So it's the same idea of Brahma and
Right.
Atma. You're saying that if you say yes to your own Atma, you are seeing Brahma at the same time. So you're owning yourself and you're being owned by Brahma at the same time. You're saying yes to God and you are saying yes to God within yourself. And if you don't do that, if you do not see the God in yourself, and if you do not see God, then you're a slave because you're attached to everything around you. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I couldn't say that any better. The choice one, actually, I would like to hear other people's comments on that first, because I'm kind of gathering my thoughts on that. Is that so? The idea that we're chosen, right? That we're all chosen. And then there's the acceptance of that. And I'm going through that in the sense that, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts around that and fate. But I haven't gathered my thoughts yet. So I'm going to leave it there for a minute.
Sure. So I'll put that up, choice. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Would love to hear what anybody else has to say. Next up is Gary.
Yeah, I wasn't really going to add too much of anything, just say that was an awesome presentation. I really liked what you had to do, what you did there. Yeah, you did a great job. With regards to, you're going to say something more.
Go ahead.
But yeah, you mentioned that it's eklegomai is the Greek word there. And so it's related to logos. You know, it's out of the logos is what's taking place. And Greek is this conjugated language, so we can play with words and make them mean all kinds of different things. The word receive is another one that, if you follow the way John uses the word receive, it means so many different things, because just by conjugating it uses antonyms and synonyms and the whole deal. So the idea that we're calling back to the logos thing, as I chose you, it's related. I love what you had to say about Atman and Brahman, because like if we go even to the creation story, the whole thing of what man is in the image of God. And so to make that choice is you know, it relates to Atman and Brahman, is to see the divine within you, is to choose God, you know, and it's really just that plain. And so yeah, back to what I was saying is I just appreciate what you had to say there. It was a very good presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to comment on the choice. I mean, the choice as I understand it. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go with Evanique first. Anybody who wants to say anything, just go ahead and type exclamation mark. Evanique.
I wanted to comment on the seeing God in yourself, and I think it's key because that's what's missing. And a lot of times, I would say in structured religion or organized religion, you don't talk about God being inside of you. It's almost a blasphemy to say that because you're equating yourself with God. And when you don't see that in yourself, how can you see it in others? But I think with choice and something Nalini brought up, I think either last week or the week before last, and she was asking the question about if you do not choose Jesus, you're not saved. And why is that? Like, why do we have to make a choice? And I think going off of this conversation, the choice is yourself. When you choose yourself, you choose God. When you choose to be who you are unapologetically, you choose God. And I think, everybody has the opportunity to choose to be who they are, and therefore to choose God. Because if God is in you, when you choose yourself, you're choosing God. And then because God is in you, because you're divine, you're going to connect to the world. And I'm going to say, I think it was in the Buckminster Fuller meetup yesterday, someone had talked about, we talk about nature as if we're not a part of it. I think the same is true for God. And if you look at God as having, if nature is in God and you're observing God as if you're not a part of God. So I don't think it's so much that you don't choose, but if you choose not to see God, God can't help you. It's like I can offer all the help to the world to somebody, and then they choose not to take it. There's nothing more I can do. God is the same way. If you refuse to see God, however that is, I always say don't get hung up on the names, Jesus, Brahma. Don't get hung up on the names. But if you don't choose to be who you are, then you're not choosing God. So those were my thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to talk more about this choice. I mean, the way I understand it is that, God chooses you. That's just grace. It's like, you have this existence, that, so there is this profound grace in just mere existence. And that is reigning on all of us. So God has chosen us. Okay, we are all chosen. Now, it's like light. I mean, I will use these things are best described in metaphors. It's like light. So there is this light raining on you. Okay, but if you stubbornly close your eyes, you will not see. And typically, people not only close their eyes, but they turn their back and look away. Then you will not see the light. Okay, it is still hitting you. It is still there. But so the light has chosen you. But if you are blind and if you do not see, then you're saying no. So God has chosen you. Now it's up to you. And what you need to do is simply to know, or simply to see, simply to say yes to what is given. So it's not like you are generating that by, you are creating, it's not that you're creating light. The light is raining on you and you are seeing it. Most people choose to be blind. Most people choose to turn their back. So that's how I understand the choice. I see choice as simply grace. The choice that when Jesus says that I chose you, it's the same principle that Ron was saying. It's like John is saying, I'm the disciple that Jesus loved. Well, Jesus loved all disciples. So Jesus chose everybody. The question is, do you say that? Do you accept that? Do you say yes? True nature, true Tao, true Brahman, because again, it's the same issue. You have Atma in you, it is in you. But you can turn away. You can focus on the periphery. You can get attached to things. And the interesting thing is that, people think that they own a lot of things. But if you're attached to those things, then you're owned by them, because that's what you're focused on. And you're not focused on the core of you. Okay, next up is Joe.
I really appreciate this very much, because you kind of almost see these relationships of acceptance, in so many different, not only in this instance, but in every different philosophy. Even if you look at the Gita, even if you look at even Stoicism to a certain degree, accept your fate, right? Do you accept it or do you resist it? And either way, it's going to be part of your tranquility. So that this is like if you resist it, then you're turning away from God. You're turning away from the universe. You're turning away from Christ. You're turning away from Krishna. So I very much appreciate that, and that's accepting God's grace. The first line, you are my friends if you do what I command you, and I agree with you. I didn't like the word command either. And I appreciate you going through that, but I also thought of the Gita as well, and how Arjuna doesn't necessarily want to fight, but he's being told to do that, and I don't know if this is an appropriate connection that I'm trying to make, but is there almost a dharma kind of element to that, in the sense that this is your duty? Or am I stretching that a little bit?
That's too difficult. It's difficult to. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not able to disengage from this context, get into that context.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
And try to figure out what exactly that means and how it would relate to this. I'm not able to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. No. Okay, that was my only other comment.
Okay, thank you.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't help. Next up is Gary.
I'm tickled that you didn't want to comment on that. That's funny. And so I will defer and not comment on that aspect of it. No, it's something that you've brought up, and we've kind of skirted around, is the idea of what is necessary and then what is sufficient. And that's the distinction between Aristotle and the Stoics. The Stoics believe that virtue is sufficient in and of itself for happiness, and which is why Epictetus could be a slave and be a Stoic philosopher. And in the lives of eminent philosophers, they talk about this, is that this alone is it's sufficient and necessary both. Whereas like what you're talking about with Aristotle, he says it's absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient in and of itself. You have to be a Greek free man. Those are necessary also. Mm-hmm. And so it's necessary to be virtuous, but not sufficient. You have to also be a free Greek man, and then you can be happy.
Absolutely. Gary, can we talk about this Aristotle's conception and Jesus's conception here, on various things. So one is that of virtue. How do you see Aristotle's conception of virtue as being different or similar and different from the one in the New Testament?
So first off is something I run into when I talk to Christian people is they see it as all or none. It's either black or white. You're either in obedience or disobedience. And I see it as really in somewhat Aristotelian or Stoic terms is they talk about mimesis, mimicking, impersonating somebody, or following their example as a means of moral progress. And so the virtues, you don't just have them, you cultivate them over time. And that's in that concept, that's something that we all agree. And so there's what's taking place here is we're being initiated in with the command, for me, it's really particular, very special that he calls his disciples children, not just children, little children, technia, little children. And then he gives the command to love. And there's lots of really good data on 2-year-olds as how they intuitively want to love, and they don't need to, they can't even concept the love command, whatever. But when there's an opportunity to love, they just want to do it. And if you're nice to them, they want to reciprocate. We're back to this love one another thing, is they just spontaneously, in my thesis, one of the issues was somebody had helped a little child, 2-year-old, and then he needed help. And the child was upset because he got help from somebody else. He wasn't the one that was able to be there to help him, was disturbed, has no concept of morality or choice, can't express their feelings, but they're obviously distressed. Like I need to be the one that helps this person who helped me. And that's, so we're starting at that, and then we're progressing to this point where we're abiding in the divine and becoming like the divine, two commands. And along that path, there's this beautiful quote. I forget the name of the author. He's an Orthodox guy. He says, wisdom is the recovery of innocence at the far end of experience.
Wow.
It's like when we go through this entire arc of moral living and virtue, we're going to get where we started when we were 2 years old, where we're just going to love for its own sake and be upset when we're not the one that's able to help the person that helped us. And so that's back to it is I think Jesus is saying explicitly in the Gospel of John that the virtue is necessary and sufficient, siding with the Stoics on that. But similar to what Aristotle is saying is, he talks about you act in accordance with virtue, and when there is more than one virtue, with the greatest of the virtues, and he's drilling it all through the New Testament and Paul and in the Gospel of John, it's love. And it's the simplistic childlike love. That's why he calls them little children. So there's moral progress that's going on that's rooted in love. And that's, you mentioned it too, but we see it in the Gospel of John. The Pharisees, they see what's happening, but they make a conscious decision not to love.
Mm-hmm.
And so we grow in virtue as we relinquish our attachment to the little things. That's there. And it's explicit in the Gospel of John. What the Pharisees are attached to is their country and their temple and their state. And they say, we can't, if we don't stop Jesus, we're going to lose it all. They're so attached to the stuff that they reject what's going on. And that was Jesus' condemnation is you're condemned because you claim to see. If you didn't see, you wouldn't have any condemnation.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I went too far on a rabbit trail. I hope that answers your question.
That was great. I want to add one more thing. And this is a pattern that I've seen. So firstly, this is just a very brief exercise on just 4 verses. And what I'm seeing is that really, I have not read this Gospel of John, I really need to go back to Greek in order to kind of see the original meanings, because there is just so much depth here. Again, this friend of mine who knows this much better than I do, he is he's looked at kind of keywords in this. So his point is that, like, the way in which the religion is implemented takes on, even in the translation, it pushes a certain way. So like when you say in purpose, right, you can't use it to really control other people. It's like, do you have the purpose in you? But when you say command, you can control the other person. His favorite example is the word metanoia. Metanoia is saying that you're rising above your current words and current thought in order to rethink. So it is all about kind of self-improvement, of saying, I was thinking like this, and now I'm able to, about this, I can look at it beyond this, I'm able to look at it and therefore change. So it is a very positive connotation of saying, I'm going to keep improving, keep looking beyond what I know and improve my knowledge. And metanoia is translated into repent. And that is very different concept, because the entire connotations is that of a negative thing. So I really want to explore all of this in depth to see, and because it's not just like individual words, you can see in the concept of ownership, like each of the words is there is an aspect of ownership underneath them. And then you can start to see, when you put them together, a completely different constellation, which is far deeper, not about the master and slave in terms of two human beings relating to one another, but what is going on within them, and how what is going on within them makes them very different. So I really look forward to exploring this further. Next up is Katie. Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think your question too is how is the ethics different? I think another, because I studied was reading Aristotle's Neo-Machian ethics. I think that Christianity is a little bit more like it. I think it's like you're kind of like struggling against desire to sin. And I think Neo-Machian ethics is more like it shouldn't even cause you pain. Like the optimal level wouldn't even cause you pain. I think if I'm pretty sure I am remembering it right, that it shouldn't even cause you pain to be fighting the desires. Like it should be just effortless. Versus Christianity, a little bit like it's a little bit more of a, struggle.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. I mean, see, this is so interesting, because like underneath all these theories are these cultures, and you kind of have to know the culture. See, the Greek culture and the culture that Aristotle is drawing on. I mean, that is an amazing, amazing time. And these are amazing, what is being done is quite incredible. There is this explosion of creativity, and there's a lot of amazing things going on. So there is that kind of social, cultural sensibility that is there for time, and Aristotle captures that. And I love what Aristotle does. I have a lot of respect for that. And then there is the New Testament that captures something which is quite spectacular in its own right. And what happens is that when we are trying to deal with that, we actually read into those things several things that we ourselves have. And then we kind of try to get only some parts of it and not other parts of it. And then, so it's very silly. So it's like, I think there is tremendous value to going and, I like to use the word commune, like communing with that text, that culture, to grasp where it is coming from. And it's just so incredible. So I, firstly, Gary, thank you for bringing up Aristotle. And that, this part about friendship was great. And so, all right. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Any comments? Okay. Let's see here. So Gary, what do you want to do next time? Or you can just let me know whenever. But I think this works very well. I'm so sorry I was not there during your presentation. I will try to be, this week is really busy for me, but going forward, I think it'll be much better. I'll be able to make it almost every time. So
I forgive you because Jesus told me to.
okay, I really appreciate that. You would do it anyway.
I'm his friend if I do what he commands.
All right. I accept that. I accept that. All right. Okay.
So we could do what we did. I like that we just go through the verses and see what jumps out. I'll give you an idea of what I'm going to build on, some background information.
So next we have to choose how many verses we're going to do. I kind of lost track. I put all of it together, but I think we should, it's too much. I think we can't do everything between now, from I think 18 to the end is what I had. I think there is a natural breaking point. We'll go by Aquinas. I think Aquinas has 2 lectures. So we'll just do the first of the 2 lectures. So
yeah, Aquinas is 18 to 21.
So we'll do 18 to 21.
Four verses.
Okay, we'll do 18 to 21. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I want to tell you about what's coming up, though. So I don't know, is Rupali still around? So let's look at. So we'll start with.
Still around.
Okay, wonderful. I hope you found it interesting, Rupali, today.
This is a new topic for me, so I'm not very familiar. So I just listen and learn. You missed what I said earlier.
Yeah.
Christ is in my head all the time.
Wonderful.
So
but tomorrow's topic, a lot more than I do, so I will throw it to Evanique first, and then Evanique can bring in Rupali whenever. So what are you guys doing tomorrow?
So Rupali, do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
no, go ahead, Evanique.
So tomorrow we are going to have an overview of an area of Indian philosophy called Shaktism, and Rupali knows way more than I do. Let's just put it out there. And we're going to look at the 3 goddesses. Well, actually 4. Sorry. Well, it's Rupali could explain it better than I can, but it's Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Parvati, which kind of bridges into Kali and Durga. So we are going to study that, and what those, and we're also going to talk about the Mahadevi, which is the supreme being, and we're going to mix in some of the Shakti and Polly, please help me out. Shiva, thank you. I just had a blank. So we're going to do a brief overview for that. And my plan is to kind of like take an overview and then go deeper with these goddesses, because I was telling Rupali tonight, like there's so much more to this, and to try to squeeze it all in one presentation would not do it justice at all. So this, at this point, will be an overview, and then I'm going to go deeper. Well, we're going to go deeper. No, Rupali's agreed to help me. So, and Penny, I'm sorry, I have to apologize. I did not bring you in sooner than yesterday. Just been crazy at work, so I'm so sorry. But Penny is a part of it too, and her and Brian have been giving me feedback. So I saw Brian's email, just didn't get a full chance to read it. But these guys have been great, and it's going to be a great presentation. And Rupali, take it away.
Well, Evanique, you said it well. I think we'll just talk about the dual relationship between, we typically think of it as male and female. It's not necessarily man and woman. I want to just clarify the distinction. It's this potential that exists, which is stable in the universe. And then there is the energy that manifests that potential into a form. So the potential is the stable masculine form, and the energy is the female form that manifests, and therefore it's the feminine. That's how the Vedic or Indian, ancient Indians thought about the two energies, the potential and the energy that exist in nature. And so we're going to talk about the energy, the Shakti. Shakti literally means energy. And the devas, or the masculine gods, they had the potential, but they couldn't manifest without the Shakti. So it is the union of two that causes the forms in the world that we live in. So that's how we're going to look at it. And yeah, I'm excited. Evanique's done a great job. She's got a beautiful presentation. So we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right.
And one more thing, I just
please.
wanted to add, when we do go deeper with the other goddesses, Rupali, had the great idea of that we put the male counterparts, and I mean the male partners, or basically that's my bad English version of it, but the male partners to the male gods to the female gods. So we're going to be studying them too in the upcoming months. We're going to fit those in along with Penny. Brian still plans on doing the Joseph Campbell book, correct? You're on mute.
Yes, after we finish, the book we're doing, Isabella Price book.
So, and so we're going to work on how to weave a deeper study into the Indian goddesses and to that as well. So yes, more to come with the Divine Feminine series. And thank you, Shrikant, for the platform to do this.
Wonderful. No, it's delightful, and I'm very, very excited about it. I'll probably be working late tomorrow, but I will definitely see it as soon as it's on video, and I'll try to join whenever I'm done. On Sunday at 9 p.m. we're doing the Bucky series, Buckminster Fuller series, and it's going to be everybody's turn. So it's going to be lightning talks. Everybody gets to speak for 5 minutes to bring up anything. It doesn't matter whether you've spent your entire life studying Bucky or you're new to Bucky. Please come and speak about anything that you find interesting about his thought. All right. So
well, I have to say thank you, Shrikant. I mean, I'm fairly new to the group, but I very much enjoy it. So thank you very much.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Nice to see you here.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry I'm not on video, but yeah.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So
Evanique, may I ask a question?
please.
This is Navini. Evanique, you and Rupali both, of course, mentioned that, so you are going to start with an overview tomorrow of the different gods and goddesses. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. It's going to be mostly the goddesses, though. We're going to incorporate the male goddesses when we do the male gods when we do the deeper study.
Oh, okay. So tomorrow it will be mainly Saraswati, you said, Lakshmi, and then Shakti, which
So
is,
start with Mahadevi
oh, okay,
and then go into Lakshmi, Saraswati, and Parvati, and
okay,
Kali after that.
okay. Thank you.
Boom. All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
And thank you,
everybody.
Shrikant.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.